Formula One is likely to see a change to the sprint race format, as Stefano Domenicali suggested that this aspect of the sport is being worked on intensively. The F1 president is in serious talks with drivers and team bosses with the aim of making the show more entertaining. But will his proposals really help the sport? With the possibility of implementing a reverse grid, will the excitement of qualifying be ruined just to get more points on Saturday? And more importantly, do F1 drivers agree with all the latest changes Domenicali has proposed? The situation between Domenicali and F1 drivers regarding sprint races has always been a controversial issue. But with the latest format change, it seems that they have found common ground. The fact that cars can be modified after the sprint race, even under parc fermé conditions, is the most significant change that has been widely accepted by F1 teams. However, this isn't really exciting for spectators, and at the end of the day, we mustn't forget something very important about Domenicali and his vision for the sport. It's all about the fans. That's why he has proposed changes, and so far, there are two very important proposals that the F1 president is ready to put on the table. Speaking about this on the Race F1 podcast, about what is the most important part of the sprint race today and what attracts people to watch it, Stefano said that there must be something to fight for on the track, something that can be relevant to the public, something that the media will talk about, and not just turn up on a Friday to do a few laps that, although they may seem incredible to someone new, are not understood. According to him, the principle was totally right, and he believes that there are already statistics on this, but that point is clear. If we think about what the first step was, it wasn't the format, but the evolution of the session, and it was different from what we have today. You have to give him credit for that. He managed to turn one of the most boring parts of the weekend into something admirable to watch. Before the latest changes in 2023, drivers were very cautious in the sprint race and didn't take any risks because they could lose a lot and gain practically nothing with their attempts. And despite this increase in the popularity of sprint races, there is still the possibility of further changes. To be more precise, and talking about what those changes might be, Domenicali said, "I think that today, in terms of the evolution of the sessions, we are on the right track. And in addition, I think there are possibilities to expand two things, which we must discuss with both the drivers and the teams, and of course with the FIA. Can we apply the sprint format to more races? Is this the right formula, with the possibility of having a reverse grid, as we do in Formula 2 and Formula 3? These are points for discussion. Let's not kid ourselves. This will generate a lot of drama among the drivers. Although everyone agreed that Formula One needs a little more excitement in sprint races, they also warned that pushing things too far could ruin the sport in general. The reverse grid has been a very controversial issue, as many drivers are opposed to it because they would probably try to set the slowest time in qualifying in order to get ahead. Reversed grids work in a very specific way. Basically, whoever gets pole position for the sprint race would start in P10, and whoever finishes in P10 would start first. That order would also apply to those classified in P2, P3, and P4, who would start in P9, P8, and P7, while P5 and P6 would swap positions. It's an interesting concept, but in Formula 2, the pole sitter in the sprint race starts on pole for the main race. We don't yet know if that would be the case under Domenicali's new proposal. If it were, there would be less criticism and negative comments. But if the drivers had to go through another qualifying session just to prove their speed over one lap, there would be a lot of problems. We know how sensitive this sport is. A small mistake can mean the difference between 1 peso and 5 pesos. Imagine you do the perfect lap for the sprint race and finish P1, but in the actual qualifying for Sunday you mess up and don't even make it into Q3. It would be a weekend to forget. Exactly how this concept will work has yet to be defined, but at the end of the day, it will be up to the drivers to accept or reject the proposals Domenicali presents to them. And this isn't the only change he wants to implement. He's also looking to increase the number of sprint races per year. We currently have 6 venues with sprint events, but on one occasion, Stefano said he saw no reason why F1 couldn't take inspiration from MotoGP, for example, and have sprint weekends every week, as Formula 2 also does. This would make the strategy and the midfield much more interesting, with big names falling under pressure or due to wrong tactics. Expanding on the increase in the number of sprint weekends, Domenicali said, "I think we are reaching the point where this is being taken seriously by the teams. The trend towards more sprint races is growing. I am ready to present and discuss, not just more sprint races because that is what the promoter wants, but also because they do not want to change the number of Saturdays and Sundays, but they do want to change the number of Fridays." Hamilton expressed his support for having reverse grids on Saturday, as he believes it is a perfect way to learn. With a different format, instead of just 3 practice sessions, a qualifying and a race, a new opportunity opens up in F1. Hamilton recalled the race at Interlagos in 2021 as one of the most fun, when he had to fight his way back from last place. Of course, this means that drivers would be willing to take more risks when it may not be necessary, because every point will count, something that does not happen now, as they are only looking to finish in the points based on their position on Friday. Other drivers, such as Russell and Verstappen, do not believe that reverse grids will bring much positivity to F1. According to them, this would create more chaos because the fastest cars would be stuck in the middle of the pack trying to overtake, and if they get stuck in a DRS train, it would mean nothing for their race. Furthermore, they consider it a punishment for being the fastest when it really matters, so this idea is sure to receive a lot more criticism in the future. And we return to an important question. Who is really in charge of the sport? The F1 director acts on orders from investors and promoters, and he cannot be blamed for that. They are the ones who generate the money and are responsible for the increase in popularity in recent years. However, some of them have little or no knowledge of racing and do not respect what they should. Traditional competitions. They are willing to invest in more sprint races, which is not a bad thing, but they do not show the same commitment to keeping historic circuits such as Spa on the calendar in the long term. We have also seen that the expansion of the sport is a major problem for the drivers, who are not very happy with the idea of racing more than 24 times a year. We already have a record number of venues in F1, but that doesn't mean it will stop there. Madrid is about to join, and the future of Barcelona is uncertain. There is great potential that promoters of new races will want to include a sprint to attract more attention and increase the fan base. And I don't blame them. They see the sport from a purely commercial point of view, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that F1 could become too dependent on external factors, and drivers and team bosses would have little or no say in decisions that should primarily be in their hands. In short, I don't think these changes are going to have a very positive effect on the sport, not because they won't add drama, but because they will give investors more power to influence how an F1 weekend is organized. With all this in mind, do you think these changes to the sprint format will affect the sport in a positive way? And more importantly, how do you think the drivers and team bosses will respond?